Hey, welcome to day 3 of the 26 by 26 challenge, and I hope it's going well for you. You're 2 days in. Hopefully you've put those things that you've learned into practice and you're growing a little bit. Today we're going to pick right back up where we left off in James chapter 1. We're going to be looking at verses 9, 10, and 11. This is what the Bible says. I'm going to read all the verses to you, and then we'll go back through them, okay? Again, this is the Christian Standard Bible, and it says this. It says, "Let the brother of humble circumstances boast in his exaltation, but let the rich boast in his humiliation, because he will pass away like a flower of the field. For the sun rises, and together with the scorching wind dries up the grass. Its flower falls off, and its beautiful appearance perishes. In the same way, the rich person will wither away while pursuing his activities." Now, he continues on after that, and we'll look at that tomorrow, but in this first part, it'll set us up for that. Now, something we can't forget when we're talking about this is he's not just jumping around randomly, right? He's not just saying random things because he has ADHD and his hyperactivity is just like, oh, squirrel and all this stuff. Like, that's not what's happening here. He's not jumping from, oh, I'm a servant of Jesus, but, you're going to go through some hard things, but be happy about it because you're going to learn to be strong in your faith. And also make sure that if you need wisdom when you're going through those trials, that you pray about them. You should do that and ask God for wisdom because he's going to do it. But by the way, if you doubt, and you're asking those things, you're not going to get anything. And so, oh yeah, by the way, if you are humble in your circumstances, like you're poor, you don't have a lot, be glad when you get lifted up. But if you're rich, watch out. Like, he's not just jumping around like that. He's talking about something. And his thought pattern is flowing. And we got to follow the flow. Okay? So it's not a different topic. We're still talking to the 12 tribes dispersed abroad who are believers. Context matters, y'all. Remember what he's talking about. So you can rightly divide the word of truth, and that you can rightly apply the word of truth. He's talking to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. Remember, they're going through trials. The great dispersion is taking place. They're being they're being hurt. They're being beaten. They're being killed, persecuted for their faith and belief in Jesus as the Messiah. And so because of that, he's writing to them. And he says, this is good when you're going through these things because you're going to be stronger in your faith because of it. And look at the good that's happening. You're turning the world upside down as you go and take the good news with you. But you're going to come into situations where you need wisdom. Ask of God, but believe that you're going to get it. Believe that you're going to receive it, and he'll give it to you. And then he says, so because you're going to get this wisdom, make sure that, like, those of you who are poor, those of you who come from humble circumstances, celebrate in your exaltation. Here's what he says exactly. Let the brother of humble circumstances boast in his exaltation. What exaltation? Well, remember when we said for you to ask God for wisdom? If you lack wisdom, ask of God who gives to all generously. The idea is that you're going to get through that hardship. You're going to get through that trial. Good things are going to come. You now have wisdom, which means that you can navigate the circumstance in which you're in wisely. With wisdom comes byproducts. Byproducts of wisdom are exaltation. You're going to be exalted above your circumstance because you've received the wisdom of God when you put it into practice. When you put it into practice, you're going to be exalted, right? Boast in that exaltation. In other words, tell your story. As you go and you're being persecuted and you're taking the good news with you, tell them, hey, I didn't just get exalted. I didn't get to this level because I'm smart. No. I used to not be. I used to struggle. I was going through something. I didn't know a way out, but God exalted me. Remember how I told you that what it was in my marriage to be reasonably committed and how it was unreasonably committed? What am I telling you? I'm telling you that I was not a great husband. I was not a great pastor. I was not a great father. But I prayed and I asked God to give me wisdom to be a better father, to be a solid husband, to be a great pastor. And now God has given me wisdom that doesn't make me a perfect husband. It doesn't make me a perfect pastor. It doesn't make me a perfect father, but it makes me a godly husband. It makes me a godly father. It makes me a godly pastor. Someone who rightly divides the word of truth, who comes under Scripture's authority instead of manipulating it to meet my own way and my own understanding of how I want to live my life. And so, because of that, it has exalted me. But I'm not boasting in who I am. I'm boasting in who God is and His faithfulness to me, because it is only by His grace, His faithfulness, His commitment to me that I am a godly husband, godly father, godly pastor. Does that make sense? In the same way, when you receive that wisdom from God and your circumstances through your faithfulness are exalted, boast in His story. Boast in His exaltation of you. Not because of you. You didn't have wisdom. You asked of God and God gave you wisdom because of who you serve, because of your unreasonable commitment to Him. That's what you're boasting in. Boast in your exaltation. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Your testimony. But let the rich boast in his humiliation. In other words, boast in your humility. My dad and my mom own one of the largest shoe stores on the East Coast of the United States. It's in Winchester, Virginia, which is a small town. I actually am filming from there right now. This is the third story of their business, and I am really high up in the air right now in Old Town Winchester in a building that's a couple hundred years old. George Washington, right out a window that's right here to my left, marched his troops right down this it's a walking mall now, a still brick paved streets, and he marched his troops right down this street, this path, and his headquarters are about an eighth of a mile ahead of me on the corner. And so really big piece of history and all of those things. And something that is interesting about the business that's two stories under my feet right now is that my dad works on the sales floor. He's a salesman at heart, which is what made him want to buy the business to begin with. And so when they bought the business over, man, what has it been, 20 years ago now that they bought the business, and my mom's worked in it for almost 40 years now, they will be on the floor and my mom's up in the office most of the time and my dad is selling. That's his strong suit. He's a people person. And so my dad will introduce people. People say, well, you know, what do you do? What do you do here? Or they'll talk to him. They don't know who he is. They don't know that he owns the business. A lot of times if they're coming from out of town. And my dad will say, oh, I just work here. I just happen to be someone who works here. And he just goes this super humble route. He doesn't tell people who he is, that he owns the store, that he's the owner or the manager, whatever it might be. He just says, I work here. In fact, interesting story, he worked here as the owner of the store. He owned the store for about 18 months to 2 years before any of the employees that he worked with actually knew that he was signing their paychecks. They didn't know that he was the owner of the business. They just thought he was working alongside them. They didn't know that the business had changed hands and that he was actually their boss. In fact, some of them acted as his boss because he was coming to learn. Didn't know much about the shoe business. He came from office supply business. But in his humiliation, he was technically above them in position and in role. They didn't know it because he acted as humble and he humiliated himself to them and in so gained their respect. And I often think of that when I hear this passage where he says, if you're from other circumstances, right? If you are, let the poor among you boast in his exaltation of what God has done, but let the rich boast in his humiliation. Why? Because like the flower of the field or the grass of the field and all these things, it'll all pass. It all perishes. The rich person will wither away while pursuing his activities, because you can go around boasting and how awesome you are, and you're going to get more and more and more and more and more, because more is never enough. That you're going to be trying to exalt yourself because now that you're in the status, you got to stay up here. Instead, humble yourself, because it's the same thing that James's brother, Jesus, taught. Whoever wants to be greatest among you must be the least, must be your servant. Servant. I love this hat. Sorry for the hat hair. I love this hat by Malta Apparel. They go to our church in Phoenix at CCV, Christ Church of the Valley, and it's a young couple. And one time we met them. They serve in kids ministry at our church, and we saw, Andrea and I took our girls for some ice cream one night, and we saw that they had kids serving shirts on, and we serve in the kids ministry, and they were getting ice cream, and because they were wearing their volunteer shirts, we bought their ice cream and just said, hey, thanks for serving our kids. And they were telling us about their clothing brand. Well, for Christmas this year, I opened up this hat that happened to be made by people in our church, and my parents didn't have a clue when they gave me the hat. I love this hat. One, it's insane quality, but other than that, I love that it says servant on it, and it's upside down because it's upside down kingdom. And how Jesus is, whoever must be the greatest must be the least. It's upside down. It's backwards from the way that the world thinks. And it's a reminder for me that I want to go low. I want to be the lowest in the room. I want to serve in the room as Jesus did when he washed the disciples' feet. Whoever is of humble circumstances boast in their exaltation. Look where God brought me. In other words, when you then become someone who was exalted, it's not of you. Tell the goodness of God that brought you there. Now, if you're in the circumstance where your circumstances are, you do have more, you are exalted, you do have a role, you do have position. Boast in your humiliation. In other words, be a servant and show what it looks like to be a servant in the middle of success. Serve the least of these. And whoever wants to be exalted must humble themselves. Or those who exalt themselves will be humbled, is what Jesus said. James caught on to what his brother Jesus was teaching and is trying to explain that to us here. Now, again, the context of that matters. The context of that is because they asked for wisdom. And when you ask for wisdom, God will give it to you, which will always exalt your circumstances. Now, if your circumstances are already high, boast in your humiliation, serve others. But when you are exalted from asking for wisdom because you navigated the circumstances of life through the wisdom that God gives, tell of the story of his exaltation. Tell where God has brought you from. Either way, your boasting is going to be of God's goodness, God's provision, God's exaltation, God's servitude to others, because that's who we want to be. We want to be Jesus to the world around us, and we will always strive to serve and tell of God's goodness because of his faithfulness to us, not because of our accomplishment of self. So remember that, wherever circumstance you find yourself in today, go low to go high. Serve your way to success. And when you find success, serve again. Always find yourself at the bottom, serving people and boast in your humility. And when God changes your circumstances from where you are now because of what you prayed for, tell that testimony to others, because it will serve as their faith to ask for wisdom in their circumstances, to see how the same God that brought you through will bring them through, so that not only will you be an unreasonably committed follower of Jesus, but you will make others unreasonably committed followers of Jesus as well. Put that into practice. Look at who you can serve today, and look at who you can share that testimony of God's faithfulness in your life with today. Be blessed, friends. Peace.